Thank you, Tony and Sherry and Sandy. Over these past couple of years in a couple of different venues, I have shared a confession about myself, something that's true of me, and that is that I like country music. But I don't like new country music. I like old country music. I like the old cheating and drinking songs. And I know, quite frankly, that I shouldn't. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not a fan of cheating and drinking. I'm just a fan of singing about it, okay? And so, anyway, if you're familiar with old country music and old cheating songs, then you are familiar with legends of that style of music like George Jones. And I was, and still love to listen to old George Jones songs. And there was a song that he wrote that experienced pretty measured success back in the 70s called The Window Up Above. It's about a man who is watching his relationship with his wife unravel as he sees her embracing another man. He is perched from the window up above and sees all this happening below. Listen to the words of this song. I've been living a new way of life that I love so, but I can see the clouds are gathering and the storm will wreck our home. If you need a Kleenex, go ahead and get it. For last night he hugged you tightly and you didn't even shove. This is true, for I've been watching from the window. You remember this? Anyway, so thank you. But it continues. You must have thought I was sleeping and I wish that I had been. But it's best to get to know you in the way your heart can sin. I thought we belonged together and our hearts fit like a glove, but I was wrong, for I've been watching from the window up above. From my eyes the teardrops started as I listened on and on. I heard you whisper to him softly that our marriage was all wrong. It's good songwriting, isn't it? But I hope he makes you happy and you will never lose and you will never lose his love. I lost mine while I was watching from the window up above. How I wish I could be dreaming and wake up to a love that's true. But I was wrong, for I was watching from the window up above. He sees all of this happening, and he is aware of it because of his perspective, because he is perched from a window up above. Isn't it amazing how we can see how things actually are when our perspective changes? When our perspective changes, we can see things not how we initially perceived them, but oftentimes as they actually are. This morning, we're going to look at a passage out of Proverbs, and we're going to see an individual, Solomon, who is this man of unparalleled wisdom. And because of his wisdom and because of his perspective, he sees a young man not simply making a bad choice, but getting on the wrong road, winding up on the wrong path. For weeks now, we've been going through a series that I've entitled Against the Tide, and we've been talking how as followers of Christ, we're not to be following the crowd, not following the drift of culture. After all, we're called to live up to the standards that God has erected for us, called to live by the standards and expectations that He has established for us. And though we can say, absolutely, that's the truth, that's how things should be, unfortunately, so many times it is not. And those that even profess to have faith in God and profess to be followers of Christ, and those even that are genuine followers of Christ, for so many, this is not the case. They're not going against the tide. They're following the crowd. They're following the drift of culture. And so many of the same sins that are trapping and ensnaring lost people are exactly the same sins that are trapping and ensnaring so many professing believers. Why is that? Why is that? Well, I would say it's because, for one reason, there are some mistaken notions. There are some things that we have thought to be true that actually are not. And because we have been operating under the assumption that certain facts are true, we have been getting trapped in and ensnared by the same thing that traps those that are outside of Christ, outside the faith. Well, unless we can ever stop that and change the thinking, we will never live in such a way that we're going against the tide. Well, what is it that we have been so mistaken about? Look with me in your Bibles this morning to Proverbs chapter 7. Proverbs chapter 7, and we're going to drop in there at verse 6. Proverbs chapter 7, verse 6. And as this passage unfolds, in many ways it reads like an old George Jones song. Proverbs 7, verse 6. For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice, and saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths, a man devoid of understanding, passing along the street near her corner, and he took the path to her house. In the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark of night, and there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. She was loud and rebellious. Her feet would not stay at home. At times she was outside, at times in the open square, lurking at every corner. So she caught him and kissed him. With an impudent face she said to him, I have peace offerings with me. Today I have paid my vows, so I came out to meet you, diligently to seek your face, and I have found you. I have spread my bed with tapestry, colored coverings of Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloe, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with love, for my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He has taken a bag of money with him and will come home on the appointed day. With her enticing speech, she caused him to yield. With her flattering lips, she seduced him. Immediately he went after her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as the fool to the correction of the stocks, till an arrow struck his liver. As a bird hastens to the snare, he did not know it would cost his life. Now therefore, listen to me, my children. Pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For she has cast down many wounded, and all who were slain by her were strong men. Her way is the way to hell, descending to the chambers of death. Well, what Solomon is describing here are some notions, some perceptions that we have had that are exactly, entirely wrong. And before we get to those, I just want to kind of walk you through this passage so that we know exactly what's going on. Now, most folks believe that Solomon is the author of Proverbs, which stands to reason because it's a book of wisdom, and Solomon was given by God unparalleled wisdom, wisdom that he's not given in that measure to anyone before or since. And as he begins there in verse 6, we don't know if Solomon is sharing a parable here or he's describing something that he witnessed personally with his own eyes. But he starts in verse 6 and he says, for at the window of my house I look through my lattice. And it seems that Solomon is probably perched up. It's wearing late in the day. Evening has come. Dusk is settling in. It's getting darker and darker. And as he looks out, it says that he perceived among the youths a man devoid of understanding, which is to say this was a young man that did not possess wisdom. But his lack of wisdom was not symptomatic of his youth, because you can be a young fool or an old fool. This happened to be a young one. And we're told that he was passing along the street near her corner. There is a woman in this passage that was well known to the community, that was well known to everyone, what type of person she was, what her identity was, how she operated, and how she lived. And we're told in verse 8 that he took the path to her house. This is not incidental. This is not accidental. He starts off walking, but then he takes the path to her house. Path is an important word in this passage. It's repeated again there at the end of the passage in verse 26. But we're told he took the path to her house, and the twilight, and the evening, and the black and dark of night. He thinks no one else sees exactly what it is that he is doing. No one else is the wiser. No one else sees that he is out walking. No one else knows that there's this encounter that's going to take place. And there in verse 10, we're told that the woman met him. Now, she was dressed like a prostitute, but she was not, in fact, a prostitute. She was a married woman. She was committed, or supposed to be at least committed to her husband, but she is dressed in seductive attire. We're told she was loud and rebellious. Her feet would not stay at home. She is the basis for some of these old country songs. This was a woman that had a cheating heart, an unfaithful heart towards her husband. But then we're told she was outside, and verse 13, she caught him and kissed him. And so he's walking along, and he's made a decision, a choice to begin walking, and he takes the path that leads him toward her house. She sees him, and she plants one on him. Wow. This might have been his first kiss, and it was just amazing. And we're told with an impudent or a shameful face, she said something to him. I have peace offerings with me. Today I have paid my vows. What she's trying to say is that I have already been to the temple and I have offered the sacrifices to cover for my sin. I have emptied out my sin bucket. It's time to fill it back up. And so she begins to say in verse 15, I came out to meet you, diligently to seek your face. Now clearly this is a woman that has been unfaithful on repeated occasions, time and time again. This is not an accidental, coincidental, incidental behavior for her. This is the pattern of her lifestyle. Infidelity characterizes her behavior. But she says, I came out to meet you. I'm not out here just looking for anyone. I was looking for you. You are special. You are something unique. I am out here and I have been looking for you. She says, I have spread my bed with tapestry. She's saying, I just went to Bed Bath & Beyond and I bought 1,000 thread count sheets. I bought the finest linens to cover my bed, covered with the colored coverings of Egyptian linen. This isn't old tan burlap. These are beautifully covered, expensive linens that are covering my bed. In addition, she says, I have covered it with the expensive perfumes that I purchased at the market. I've emptied out my sin bucket. My bed is ready to go, so let's get it on to the break of dawn, is what she's saying to him. Right? It's unambiguous what she is saying. She says, come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Now, it's undeniable. It was clearly known by this young man that this was a married woman, and she doesn't hide that fact. In verse 19, she says, my husband is not at home. He's gone on a long journey. And keep in mind, there's no airplanes, there's no trains, there's no buses, there's no automobiles. And so if you're going to go on a long journey, you're going to be gone for probably weeks on end. And to confirm that, it says he's taken a bag of money with him. He's going to be gone for a long time. And so what she's trying to say is the coast is clear. No one's going to catch us. I was here looking for you. You are special. You are unique. I was here looking for you. I gave you that kiss, and there's more where that came from. My husband's gone. He'll never catch us. No one will be the wiser. And in verse 21, with her enticing speech, she calls him to yield. With her flattering lips, she seduced him. And he goes marching off like an ox to the slaughter, or fools headed to the stock where they were to be bound by their wrist and by their neck. He goes after. And Solomon says, pay attention in verse 24 to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside. Do not stray into what? Her paths. Again, there's that word path. It's important in this passage. What you see unfolding in this passage, the specifics of it are not that strange or that far removed from things that go on today. But even in principle, there are so many ways in which we wind up experiencing our own failures, our own misgivings. Instead of going against the tide, we wind up getting on paths and getting on roads that lead us with the crowd, lead us as this young man was, ensnared and trapped by sin. How did he get that way? How do we get that way? Again, it's because of some mistaken notions that we have had, and here's the first one. Our choices only generate an event. Our choices, your choices, only generate an event. As he is being seduced, as this woman has just planted this enormous kiss on him, and she's made clear her desires, and she's made very open this invitation for an adulterous affair with her, as this young man is weighing his options, as he's trying to decide what to do, You've got to know that he was aware that this was wrong. He knows that she's married, and she's not hiding that fact. He is aware that what she is seeking to engage in with him is absolutely wrong, and yet he does this. Well, he does this, it seems logically, because first of all, he's thinking, well, it's just one night. It's just one act of pleasure. Her husband's gone. Nobody else is going to know. Even people in the community, everybody in town knows that this is a cheating, adulterous woman. And so it's not like this is going to be a blight on her character. It's dark. It's at night. No one else sees. No one else has any idea. He had no idea that God was watching. Had no idea that Solomon is watching this from his window above. But in verse 8, again, that word path is used. In verse 26, it's used again. She seduces him and gets him to not only do a wrong thing, but to get on a wrong road, to get on a path. Why? Because our choices are not in isolation. Our choices do not simply generate an event, they put us on a path. But so many times, like this young man, we think, well, it's just this one time. It's just this one night. It's just this singular act. But let me just tell you, that's wrong. That's the thought of foolishness. That is deception. Our choices do not only generate an event. How many have ever known someone who said, you know what, I would absolutely love, my short-term and long-term goal is to get trapped in an immoral lifestyle. Anybody ever told you that? I just want to get absolutely trapped and wrapped up in an immoral lifestyle. How many of you have ever known, and some of you have had friends, maybe you yourself have gone through some of these struggles, or you have family members that have struggled with drugs or with alcohol. How many of you have ever known someone that said one day, just out of clear blue, you know what, I would like to become a drug addict. I'd like to be stealing from family members and losing my job and taking money and possessions from strangers to support my drug habit. I just desperately want to become a drug addict. Or how many of you ever have known someone that said, you know what, more than anything, I would just love to become an alcoholic. I don't want to just drink sometime. I want to drink all the time. I just want to live 3 sheets to the wind. How many of you have ever known somebody that started out with that desire? Well, we haven't known anyone that's like this, but we see people trapped in immoral lifestyles. We see individuals trapped in drug and alcohol addiction. How does it happen? It happens because lost people and too many saved people think that our choices only generate an event. It's just this one time. It's just this one act. But our choices do not simply generate an event. They put us on a path. I shared with you a few weeks ago how starting at the 1st of September, I have made some changes in my lifestyle with regard to diet and exercise. And very much I am on the health and exercise wagon, and I have been doing well. At this point, I am down 15 pounds. And because of that, because of these decisions, there are some things at this point that are no longer a regular part of my diet. You're aware of the fact that if miracles occurred every day, they wouldn't be called miracles, right? We'd call them ordinaries. But miracles are unusual events. Treats should also function that way. If you have a treat every day, it's not really a treat. It's just part of what you eat. Well, that's something that had become a problem for me. A number of years ago in Charlotte, for the very first time, I went to a cookout one night, and I got a chocolate milkshake with extra Reese's cups on it. It was a treat. And so I had it that night, and it was wonderful. And as time began to pass, this treat became something that I wouldn't just do periodically, but I'd say, and this is no joke, 3 or 4 times a week, I'd be heading over to cookout. I'd be sitting back at the house at 9 o'clock, sucking down this chocolate milkshake with extra Reese's cup, probably 1,000 calories in that cup. I'm eating this at 9 o'clock only to go to bed at 10, and so my clothes were not happy with me, right? And so at this point, I have sworn off all that stuff, and I haven't had a milkshake now in almost 2 months, and I'm just so proud of myself because I was ensnared in this. But the truth is, again, at this point, I am down 15 pounds, and I have been doing great. Daily, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. I'm doing great, and I'm feeling better than I felt in a long time. And by any measure, I could, should I choose to, I could go tonight to get a cookout milkshake, and I could eat it, and it would be okay. It's not that my belt is going to bust open tomorrow. I could go get a milkshake tonight, but I'm not going to, and I'm not going to for a couple of reasons, and the first is this. I know that if I get a milkshake tonight and I rationalize to myself, I have been good now for 2 months. It's okay if I splurge and I have this tonight. That'll be okay. I won't do that because I know that if I say that tonight, maybe on Wednesday or Thursday night, I'll be thinking, I've been doing good for the past couple of days, and head back. And if I do that on Wednesday or Thursday night, I could say, well, it's Saturday, it's the weekend. And all of a sudden, I'm going to be back off the health and exercise wagon and back on the train back to the fat farm. I mean, that's what's going to happen. And so I resist that. I do not do that. But my thinking is also motivated by this reality. I have been working hard at this now for nearly 2 months. And I know that it would be easy to get lax and to begin to take it easy and say, it's just this one time, it's just this one milkshake, it's just this one night. I know that if I operate or I rationalize that way, it will be so much easier to say it again and again and again and again until I'm back on the path that I was before. What's going on? It's the same principle that you see Solomon describing in this narrative here. And that, again, is that our choices do not only generate an event. They do not merely occur in isolation. They happen, and these choices put us on a path. They put us on a road. Spiritually, this same principle is true. When you are in the pursuit of maintaining God's standards, you could easily say, you know what, I have been doing great for years. I have been faithful to the Lord and to His church. I've been faithful in trying to grow deeper in my relationship with Him and understand the standards that He wants me to live by. And so I can do this. Pick whatever sin you want to. I can do this, and it'll just be this one time. But when sin enters in, once it defiles, it makes it so much easier to do it again and again and again, where you find yourself not having merely committed an act, but gotten on a path, gotten on a road that doesn't lead you closer to God, but puts you on a path that leads you to run with the crowd away from the Lord. We wind up not living against the tide because we have deceived ourselves into thinking our choices only generate an event. False. But there's another false notion, which is this: good intentions trump bad choices. Good intentions trump bad choices. I imagine as this young man is weighing his options and trying to make his decision, there was never in his mind, certainly when he woke up that morning, you know what, I would like to be an adulterer. I would like to be engaged in sexually immoral behavior. I'm sure that was not his intention. I'm sure that in terms of intention, he, like the most of us, has had the best of intentions. I want to be a good and upstanding man. As a faithful Israelite, he wanted to be a good and faithful follower of and servant of God. That was his intention. But what did he do? Well, when faced with this temptation, when provided this opportunity, he is allowing himself to be seduced. And it's so easy to blame this woman, but he makes the choice to go out walking. He makes the choice to go to the path that leads to her, and ultimately he makes the choice to engage in this adulterous affair. But this is not, I'm sure, what he intended. I'm sure he had the best of intentions, saying, I meant to do well. I meant to do right. I meant to do good. But here is the truth. Good intentions do not get you to the desired destination. Choices do. Your intentions do not get you to the destination. Your choices do. We've talked about this before, but it deserves repeating. Let's say tomorrow you decide, or this afternoon you decide, tomorrow morning when we get up, let's go to the beach. The hurricane's already north, and so here in the off season, it should be a nice, pleasant week. It'll be minimal crowds. We can go to restaurants, we can go to stores. It might even be warm enough to walk on the beach in the afternoons. And so let's get up and go to the beach in the morning. And so that's the intention. And so as a result, you begin to pack your things today. And so you get the changes of clothes. You take perhaps some clothes that, if it's warmer outside, some shorts or T-shirts that you might be able to wear. Even pack some sunscreen if you're going to be out on the beach for a while. You pack your flip-flops so that you don't get sand in your shoes. And so at that point, you get the car packed up, you get it gassed up, and so you're going to, tomorrow morning, leave to go to the beach. And let's say as you leave Greensboro and you leave your driveway, you leave your neighborhood, you get on I-40 headed west. Will you ever get to Myrtle Beach? No. But you had the best of intentions. You intended to go to Myrtle Beach. You intended to have a nice time. You intended to walk on the beach. But you'll never get there. Why? It's not because your intentions were bad, rather because your choices were bad. And you made a choice that puts you on a path that leads you to the wrong destination. Listen, you may say in your life that you want to have as a teenager a sexually pure life, but you'll never get there when you choose to engage in immoral sexual behavior. You may say as a couple and as a family, we want to be financially secure and out of debt, but you will never get there, even though your intentions are good, so long as you continue to rack up money and excessive debt on a credit card. You will never get to the destination in spite of your intentions. You may say, I want to, and we intend as a couple to raise children that know the Lord, that walk with Him and serve Him throughout the course of their life. That may be your intention, but if you never impart spiritual truth to your children, it will not happen, regardless of your intentions. You may say, I intend to speak to others in ways that are beneficial, helpful, and encouraging. And those may be your intentions, but if you continue to choose to say things without any filter, if you just say the first thing that comes into your mind, that will never happen regardless of your intentions. You may say, I intend to change how it is that we entertain ourselves and what we watch on TV. That may be your intention, to avoid godless worldviews and godless sexual standards and godless moral standards. You say, I intend to, and we as a family intend to watch things that don't subject us to that. But so long as you never change the channel, so long as you watch what everybody else is watching, that will never happen. After all, good intentions do not trump bad choices. This man wound up in this place not going against the tide, not resisting the temptation, but headed towards it, doing exactly what lost people were doing, because he first of all thought, well, it's just an act. His choice only generated an event, but it put him on a path. And beyond that, he thought, you know what, I've got the best of intentions. And even afterwards, he might have comforted himself, saying, well, you know, I had good intentions, but good intentions do not trump bad choices. There's a third faulty thought, which is this: our paths do not determine the destination. Our paths do not determine the destination. Your choices and mine do not stand as isolated events. They do not occur in a vacuum. It matters not if you intend to do right, if you intend to do good, if you choose to do wrong, if you choose to make sinful choices, you're going to put yourself on a path that will lead to a particular destination. Every road in life, physically speaking, leads somewhere, doesn't it? Hilltop Road leads to Groomtown that way or to High Point this way. Wendover is going to lead somewhere in either direction. Every road that we drive on leads to a destination. That's true in a physical sense, but it's also true in a spiritual sense from a metaphorical standpoint. The paths that you choose to get on in your life, they will lead you to a particular destination. It can be a road that is leading to blessings and faithfulness and rewards by God, or it could be a road that is filled with sin, with selfishness, and personal desire. And your choices, the choices that you make, the decisions that you make, put you on a path. Again, they're not choices that exist in isolation. Our choices put us on roads. They put us on paths. What path are your choices putting you on? And where is that path leading you? As a follower of Christ and one that is to go against the tide instead of going with the drift of culture, we need to be asking ourselves questions like this. What type of financial steward does God want me to be? What does God want our financial situation to look like? What does God want our family life to look like? What type and what manner in which does He want us to raise our children? What does He want them to look like when they are not little boys and little girls, but they are grown men and women? What type of media does God want me to expose myself to? What type of speech does God want me to use? In terms of lifestyle, what does God want for me and expect of me, and how it is that I treat and manage and take care of my body? Listen, these types of questions are leading you to think about ultimate destinations. Do you want to be in poor health and overweight? Do you want to be financially destitute, having no savings, not prepared for retirement? Do you want to have children that have run from God instead of to Him? Do you want to be those that are affected by the secular worldview that we're subjected to through popular media? Those are destination questions. And so you need to ask yourself, what do I want the destination to look like? What does God want the destination in all of these varied aspects of my life to look like? And once you recognize what the destination should be, what are you to do then? You start making choices that put you on the paths that get there. Again, your choices are not isolated events. They generate behaviors that put you on a path. And that path is leading somewhere. To what destination are your choices leading you? The faulty notion, again, is our paths do not determine the destination, but they absolutely do. There is a final myth that I would share with you from this passage, which is this. Events cost us, paths do not. Events cost us, paths do not. This guy that Solomon is watching, as he sees this soap opera unfolding before his eyes, probably again rationalized to himself, yes, this is not right, this is not good, she's a married woman and I'm not married to her, and so this is out of bounds, this is inappropriate. But I'm sure he rationalized to himself, it's just one night, it's just one act. And in terms of consequence, I imagine that he thought they are at best minuscule. After all, she's painted the picture for him. She said, well, my husband's gone. He's taken a stack of money. He's not scheduled to be back for another 3 weeks. And the fact that he's taken some, he's going to be gone. You have nothing to worry about. Nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to be the wiser. It doesn't make any difference. It's safe. It's okay. But what does Solomon describe this behavior as? He describes it as an ox who was headed off to the slaughter. He thinks that he's headed to greener pastures to eat more, but he's going to wind up as steak for the owner. Or as a fool to the correction of the stocks. The fool thinks, well, we're just going on a road trip or we're just going on a field trip, but he's getting ready to be bound with his head and his wrist in the stocks. As a bird hastens to the snare, and this bird sees this doesn't recognize that it's a trap, thinks that it's something that's wonderful to eat, it's a great pleasure to be enjoyed. He doesn't recognize it. This man does not recognize it because he thought, well, this just isn't going to cost. And the thought is, well, even if it does, it's just going to be minuscule. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe your husband finds out? I mean, what's the worst that could possibly happen? But in terms of consequences beyond that, obviously this put him on a path that would probably lead to more types of sexual encounters like this, exposing himself to all sorts of sexually transmitted diseases, established a pattern of sexual impropriety that would make intimacy for him in the future difficult with what could potentially become his wife. It could have led to disrupted or destroyed personal relationships. It could have resulted in violence, that it could have led to injury or even to death. But he didn't see any of that. It's okay. Nobody knows. The husband's gone. It's not that big of a deal. And even if anybody finds out, it's just the cost of this particular incident. It doesn't have rippling effects. Here is the truth. The events cost, but the paths that those events put us on, they cost even more. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you've got a teenage girl that as she gets later into her teen years, she has it all mapped out in her mind of what the dream future looks like in terms of relationship. And she's going to be married to a wonderful man, and they're going to have a wonderful house. It's going to have the white picket fence. It's going to have a great, pleasant, sweet dog, and the dog is going to be played with by a little boy and a little girl, and there's going to be a great big tree in the front yard and a tire swing that's hanging from it, and she's got the perfect picture of what this is going to look like. And she desires this so much. This is where she wants to wind up. She longs for it so that the first person that shows her any attention boy, she just laps that attention up. And increasingly what happens is that he begins to put pressure on her, and she's sought to and planned on and intended on keeping and maintaining sexual purity, but he's putting pressure on her. And the hint is that if I don't engage in this, well, he might leave me, and I could lose all of this. And so she yields to that, and what became a sexual encounter turns into a sexual relationship. Because of this, it clouds her judgment, and she winds up marrying this dude that she had no business marrying in the first place, and it certainly wasn't the individual that God intended that she spend the rest of her life with. And she winds up committed to this individual for the rest of her life. And with not much time, this becomes one of the most regrettable decisions that she's ever made. He's not a good guy. It's not a good relationship. It's not pleasant. It's not happy. It's not leading to the destination she had hoped that it would be. And her only option is divorce to get out of it. She's on a path that is costing her, a path that she feels trapped by. Listen, events cost, but the paths that they put us on cost us even more. It happened for this young man that Solomon was watching. He was operating under these false notions that our choices only generate an event. And if you have good intentions, that trumps even the bad choices that you make, or that our paths, they don't determine the destination, and that events cost us and paths do not. And all of these things we see demonstrated in his life were patently false. It was true then, and it's true today. So where does this leave us? Well, in terms of application, let me share with you a couple of things. First of all, know this. You are on at least another person, or maybe multiplied people in your life. You are one that is sitting, watching from the window up above. And you have a perspective that they may not have. There are people here in this congregation with whom or for whom you are that person like Solomon who is watching and seeing what is going on down below. And it is so much easier, isn't it, to see the folly and the foolishness in others than it is ourselves. And you can see this unraveling in the lives of someone else. If you see it, do your best to stop it. If Solomon had left his perch and gone down to this man and said, "Do not do this. Remember who you are. Remember whose you are," do you think this would have happened? No, but Solomon just watches this. There are people that you are just watching that are getting on a path that is leading them not against the tide, but with the crowd, not headed closer to God, but headlong away from Him. You have an obligation to try to reach out to them, to share with them the perspective that you have. And it's easy to say, well, am I, as Adam and Eve's son Cain said, am I my brother's keeper? It's none of my business. And after all, the Christian relationship and the person's walk with God, that's a private affair. It's none of my business. Well, understand this. The Christian relationship is deeply personal, but it is not private. We are part of a team sport here. We are on the same team, and we have an obligation to make sure that our entire team crosses the finish line. And you have the perspective of in someone else's life. You're that person from the window up above, and if you have the opportunity to reach out and try to help them, do so. But there's a second layer of application, which is this. Someone else is watching you. Someone else is in the window up above looking at you. And if they take my advice from that previous thought and they come to you and say, you're headed the wrong way, you're getting trapped by this. If they caution you, it would be so easy to brush it off and say, well, look at the stuff they're doing in their life. I mean, they're not perfect, so who do they think they are telling me something? Listen, someone does not have to be perfect to be correct in making a truthful statement. For example, I could go to the store this afternoon and a convicted rapist that is out after having served their time, someone that's done a terrible, terrible act, they could come up to me and say, your shoe's untied, and they would be exactly right about it. Listen, people don't have to be perfect to be able to state what is the truth. And if someone comes to you and says, listen, you're headed on a path that is leading you not against the tide, but with the tide, leading you further from God and not to Him, hear it for what they say and see if in fact there is truth in it. But there's another thought, which is this. Not only are you watching someone else and you having the seat in the window above in the lives of others, not only somebody else watching you, but ultimately there is one that's watching all of us. Listen, Solomon was perched above in a position of perspective and a perspective of wisdom. God, from the perch of heaven, is able to see everything that is going on, and nothing you are doing goes without His notice. He has the perspective not only of position, but also of wisdom. And He knows what you're doing, the folly of it. But here is the good news. He has said in James chapter 1, verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Listen, the perspective and the wisdom that God has, He's saying, listen, I will give that to you. I'm not going to fuss at you for asking for it. If you'll ask it, I'll give it to you and give it to you liberally. But there's a final layer of application, which is this. Nathan and Andrew, our oldest two boys, are playing flag football as part of Upward Football at a local church. And so they are on different teams. Nathan is getting ready to turn 7 in December. Andrew just turned 5. And I enjoy watching both of their games, but in all honesty, I really enjoy watching Andrew's games because it's 4 and 5-year-olds out there. And football is not the easiest sport to understand, and none of these kids have ever played it in any organized way before, and so it's a big learning experience. And so consequently, each game is in many ways a comedy of errors, and it's a lot of fun to watch, to see these little guys scrambling for the ball and trying to do the right thing. And I don't know how many times I have seen this unfold, whether it was some other little boy or it was with Andrew. So you've got one of them that's playing the center, quarterback's behind him, and at 4 and 5, these kids couldn't catch a cold, much less a football. And so there's no passing. It's an entirely running game. And so the center gets down, he's going to hike the ball. The quarterback says, down, set, hike. The quarterback gets the ball, and let's say he hands the ball to Andrew as the running back. As soon as he gets the ball, the other team then, all these other little boys, they start chasing it. And so what's the natural instinct? The goal is that way, but what does Andrew do? Well, he hightails it towards this way. Well, you know that you never score when you're headed the wrong way. You never score when you're not headed towards your goal. And so what happens? Well, the coaches and all the adults start saying, Andrew, you're going to go that way, go that way, go that way. And what happens is that invariably we finally get their attention, they make a turn, and they start heading the right direction. Listen, you and your life are never going to get to the goal when you are not headed towards it. And even if at this point you are not headed the right direction, the good news is there are exits on this road. exits where you can turn around, exits where you can begin to take a different path that leads to a different destination that leads you to go against the tide. My question for you today is this: what road, what path are you on? Is it one that is leading you against the tide, against the drift of culture, closer to God, deeper in your walk with Him? Or is it leading you further and further and further away? Let me be like Andrew's coach to you today and say, you're going the wrong way. These faulty notions, they are absolute deceptions, and God has revealed the truth in His Word. The question is, will you today take the exit ramp? Won't you bow your heads with me? Too many of us are not living differently, markedly different from those that are outside of Christ. It shouldn't be that way, but for too many it is. Maybe for you, that's a true statement.